Welcome and thanks for tuning in for episode 3 of the Road Best Travel podcast. I know it's been a while since the last episode with Bernadette Nugent, the CEO of Amber Community. Unfortunately, she's moving on to better and bigger pastures, moving on from her CEO position with Amber Community. But she has been nothing but instrumental with Amber Community and been such an amazing support for not only myself, the family, and everybody else within the road trauma support and counselling services. So a big thanks to Bernadette from the last episode we did with her and all her time at Amber Community. This episode 3, I've been sitting on it for quite a while now. Could be a bit of a heavy episode, but it's a completely unabridged, unedited, unscripted version of my story. I hate using that term of, my story, but as we've sort of been emphasizing recently of the ripple of road trauma, and that is so many people who are caught up in the effects of road trauma from people who have been lost. There are unfortunately so many stories of family, friends, colleagues, so many people in those ripples whose days have been completely turned upside down following that incident. So this story is the unfortunate one of when my brother Josh Presney lost his life in the Eastern Freeway crash in April 2020. I guess as a courtesy, just to, not a trigger warning, but there may be things in this that are difficult to listen to. So just as a heads up for those listening, those who may have been involved, just as a bit of a courtesy for you guys that this may be difficult to listen to. So from here, it'll be a completely unedited, unscripted, unabridged storytelling of the 22nd of April, 2020, and the days following. Really strange feeling. You kind of press the record button and then you go, well, where do I start with this? Because I'll probably eventually get on a roll with it sooner or later, but I guess, the start of the day. How did that go? For me, it was just, work your shift. Same with Josh. He was on his placement with the traffic, his traffic placement at the time, which was really cool to see. Good to see if he had any interest in that sort of area of the job. But he was really good with just sort of trying things out. Didn't really have any specific place that he wanted to be in the job. He just sort of wanted to try everything out his best, and he was really doing a great job at it. Well, I obviously did my shift at that in the morning. I couldn't remember when he was having his shift. I think it was, I think I remember him knowing what sort of shift he had, but obviously didn't know it off the top of my head. So I finished my day. It's about 3 o'clock. Get a phone call from a good mate of mine who I used to work with, and just asking questions, chewing the fat, really just sort of chatting with each other, which is good to have company, being in the lockdowns and not really able to see people and things like that. We're just talking, how you going at, your new place, how you going at your new place, how's Josh going? And it was just, just the same old same. Yeah, he's really enjoying it, just trying out new things, being a sponge, making sure that he's, working things out, not stepping on toes as a junior member and things like that. So it was just a really good chat about that. And then, from then it was just to treat, I guess, the days as, completely normal. You just go home, do what you do to kill the afternoon, and then you've got your next day. It's almost like those things days just roll on in a way. And then we do what I guess, anyone does at that time, was just to, I guess, to kill the time, was playing video games. That is exactly, what I was doing at the time it all happened, I'd say. So that's, I guess, where my memory starts of this whole thing occurring. Can't really remember anything beforehand. But the way it went, and I'd say that this is around 6 o'clock, because the time of the incident, 5:36. So it's around 6 o'clock, maybe a bit later. Sitting on the end of the coffee table, playing Call of Duty, Warzone, for those who remember the good old days of Warzone. The first introduction to it for me was getting a message over a group chat. And quite abrupt in terms of, I guess, how it came across. There was no beating around the bush with it. It was basically saying, have you heard what's happened on the Eastern Freeway? Not much detail involved, and it was there's been a crash on the Eastern Freeway, and to put it this way, 3 members dead. Just came across that way, and I didn't know what else to expect with it, and it kind of was like, okay, how do I read that? And then everything just sort of, just computing everything of what I was just reading there, and I was just like, oh, that's really weird. When that sort of thing hits you, you don't expect to see that. Out of the blue is just the best way to put it. As simple as that. And then I think a bit of information about, asking, going, where, what exactly, and then, details of it came out. Was just basically that it was, a big collision and 3 to 4 members dead. And then it was just like, oh right, okay, well, how do we digest this? And then I was sort of thinking, ooh, okay, I'm at home, but Josh isn't. I think Josh is on an afternoon shift, and I think he's working. And I think he's working in that area of where it happened. And so I sort of put that into the group chat, and I went, couldn't really, I guess, put it any other way. And I just sort of said, does anyone know who it is? Because Josh is on his placement, and he's potentially in that area. And not much information came out, but from this moment was when the wheels started turning and we could not put the brakes on. And everyone was sort of saying, no, we don't know, why don't you call him? And it was a really difficult thing. It wasn't just as easy as just picking up the phone and going, hey, and expecting it, because unfortunately what I had in my mind was nothing was drawing away the fact that it could have been him. Nothing was pulling me away whatsoever. I was sort of thinking, I don't want to call him because what if he doesn't answer? Then we're gonna know. It's gonna be, my heart rate's gonna increase. Things are just gonna get worse and worse and worse. If that happens, if I call him, I want to make sure that he picks up on the first ring or the second. But after about 30 times, it rang out, and I could still, to this day, hear his voicemail in my head. Just got worse and worse. And from previously of just going, there's nothing that's drawing me away from this. There is nothing that is, from the very get-go. There was no alibi. There was no reason why it wouldn't be him. There were so many reasons for me pointing towards that it was him involved. And from this point, trying to figure out what was going on, it was just panic. Absolute panic. And there's nothing I can do. There was nothing I could do. Stuck at home, trying to get information and answers. And I'm calling friends and calling people and going and thinking, I need to know. I need to know what's happening. And with absolute respect to my mates who I spoke to at the time, of course, they couldn't just tell me. They couldn't just give the answer and go, look, they, were very professional about it and were very, very, good with it. But at the same time, the less you know, the less, you just get an answer. The more of it being, look, I don't know, I can't tell, then you just sort of just go. For me, it was the simplicity of literally just saying, well, that's him. It's got to be. Because there's been nothing put in front of me to say that it's not. And at this point, I didn't know what. I didn't know where. I didn't know who. I didn't know how. All I knew was that this was a potential that Josh had died. And obviously from the initial job of it being, during an intercept on the Eastern Freeway, and just had no idea of what the hell else or any other information. I've never been in a situation where I could literally feel my head spinning. You know that saying where you go, my head is spinning. I could honestly feel it spinning. It was an absolute phenomenal experience and a phenomenal feeling, not in a good way. And then, what else do we have to tackle with this? So I get a phone call from Mum, because Mum and Dad have seen something on the news. I can remember that headline as well of the news breaking at around Channel 9 News. Mum and Dad just had their routine of cooking dinner, having the news on in the background, and Mum innocently asking me, what's happened? We've just seen something occurring on the Eastern Freeway. Do you know what's going on? And I obviously couldn't hide how this was feeling for me. And I was just saying, look, I don't know. And I don't think Mum and Dad would have thought about it at the time. But when I said, I've been trying to get in contact with Josh because he's working, and that's around that area, and I can't get onto him. And then I think for Mum, that's where it started for her and for Mum and Dad, about the feeling of it being not just inquisitive and going, what's going on? Have you heard something? To going, this is involving Josh. This is involving our son. And I can still remember talking to Mum. I can picture where Dad would have been standing. Of talking to Mum and hearing the panic in Mum's voice, and then Dad calling over to her. I can remember this as clear as it's happening now, where he's obviously picked up onto the conversation and he calls out, "What's going on?" With I can't even describe, I guess, that feeling of how it would have felt in his mind. It was a demand that Dad had. Demanding what the hell's going on. What are you talking about? What's this? That father's intuition of, I need to know now. This could be involving me and my son. And then I guess it was figuring out from here. I know we just had to leave the conversation with, we've got no answers. We don't know. I've tried to call Josh, and then I think Mum and Dad then also tried to call Josh. And that was the last that I heard from Mum and Dad until I saw them. It was a lot later. And from here, I guess was living in that total head spin. And it was the same situation for Mum and Dad, where everything went quiet. Everything just went dead quiet. Because I guess some sort of formality had to come. And some sort of, the next page was being turned at the time. And it was, I wonder what the hell this is now. And my wife Rachel was, we were saying as much as we could, it's not him. He's just helping. He's on shift, but he's helping. He's there. He can't answer. And that's what I hoped and I wished. But as time went on, I just kept saying, no, it's not. It's him. I think they're the words that I was saying. It's him. He's involved in a way. That's not what I was saying. I was saying it's him. And then, it was just this waiting. I remember lying on the floor, kind of on the side in the fetal position, and the feeling of my head spinning. Man, it's an exhausting feeling of having that feeling. If I can remember it well. I can't really, but... And then, I think what then is that I went up to bed. I went upstairs and I said, I need to move from here. Something I don't even know. I don't even know when the time came. The time just rolled on. Between knowing, I guess the first initial instance of knowing what happened until this next moment, I can't remember whether it was 3 hours, 3 minutes, or whatever. Time was irrelevant for me. So I take myself up to bed and I sit. I can't picture what I did, whether I lay down or I sat. I don't know for how long. And then the doorbell rang. And then I get the message that everybody dreads and that everybody fears from the TAC ads. The number one fear that every family member has of the knock on the door to tell you that your loved one has been killed. And I know there are a lot of members out there who have delivered these messages, and I have too. And geez, never did I ever think that I was going to be on the receiving end of one too. But luckily, I was greeted by familiar faces. And then from here, I guess, we've gone from being completely flattened, and then the autopilot turned on. And it was, we need to go see Mum and Dad. That's what we have to do next. And so I think we just packed a bag, got into the car, and then drove. And you know, I had no questions. I had nothing to say. This was autopilot. This was what, like, you can't even describe it. This is what the feeling of shock feels like, where you're just in it, but you don't know you're in it. So you have to just basically, it feels like following the crowd. You just follow along blissfully without knowing. And I said at one point, you know, while we're driving up, I think I said, "What do I do about work?" And then I think they sort of went, "That's not something you need to worry about now." I think back on that and I go, yeah, what sort of question was that? I do remember that that's what I asked, but yeah, I remember it being so strange to ask in hindsight. What I did as well was, as we're driving, I'm looking out the window of the car, driving up Warrigal Road, and I've just followed it. I just looked out to my right, and I saw this big star, this very bright star, and I don't know what I was thinking then, but I just followed it. I just watched it for God knows how long of this trip. I just watched it, whether or not that meant something or not. But yeah, I just saw this very, very bright star, and there were no other stars around it. It was just a very, very bright star. And I followed it, and I watched it until we got to Mum and Dad's. And at this point, yeah. How do you describe this scene? I can't describe this scene. It was pandemonium. It was being greeted by Mum and Dad at the door. Absolutely a complete wreck, all of us. And I remember coming in and seeing Dad, and he was sitting down, and he had his sisters around him, and we've got other family around us, and it's kind of like when you sort of go, where on earth did everyone come from? My grandmother's there, everyone's there, and it's so odd. You just embrace everyone as much as you can, because it's all you're feeling is complete devastation and sadness and exhaustion as well. And I remember, I think someone brought over his jacket. That was obviously at the station, and I just found it, and I just clutched it and held onto it and sobbed into it. That's, I guess, the best that I can remember of that section there. And I guess if I could observe how everyone looked, Mum says that she felt so odd and out of place where this is surrounding her, but she is feeling like she's some sort of host, and greeting people that came into the house and being so, I guess, polite and not being in a complete heap and a complete wreck. And then I guess how that she remembers it in hindsight is that, that is shock. That is autopilot. That is going into default settings, because that's obviously what some people do. But yeah, she asks herself, why the hell wasn't I in a complete state, in a complete wreck? And I can't answer that. I don't know. This was obviously just your reaction. Dad was a statue, frozen, grey. That's the way that's, I guess, if there were other observations made of that time, and it was that Dad was grey. That's, there's ways to describe, green means you're sick, blue means that you're upset, red means you're angry, grey, I don't know what that means, but I can picture what it looked like. And then time just rolls on, and we have to do something about it. We get information. I can't even remember the information that we got from those that were dealing with it at the time. And then it became, I'm picking pieces out of remembering of the images that I have in my head, in my mind's eye. And it was, eventually, well, God, how's this? You have to go to bed. You have to go to sleep. And I don't know what time it was, but it was the feeling of your body and your mind shutting down. And eventually, no matter how much you tried to fight it, to try and stay awake and to try and, I guess, deal with this, your body wouldn't let you, because it had already gone through such exhaustion from 5 o'clock that afternoon, and it's still pumping this absolute adrenaline and this feeling through you, and it's got to stop sometime. And so we went to bed. I think I fell asleep. I can't remember the feeling. I remember the feeling of waking up. I woke up half a dozen times, I'd say. And then the next morning, it was just this, beforehand it was, where we were, because Josh still lived at home, was just his room, in situ, everything. There was the hum of his amplifier still there, the guitar cable just on the floor, because he'd obviously been playing that day, looking at his bed unmade, things just as it was that he should just be coming back to. And I remember looking at it and going, what on earth? Just this feeling of looking in this and having the feeling of, well, he'll be back, right? Because it's just the way it is. Nothing's packed up. He'll be back. This is ready for him. But as time went on, it just stayed like that. And it was weird to pass that. It felt like, and I'd say this afterwards, we were sort of saying, it felt like he's gone on holidays. He's away. And this is just how it is. This is how he's left things. But little to our knowledge and his knowledge, this was it. This was the last time. And so, yeah, the next day comes, and it's kind of just like, it's still on autopilot. So now we're on the 23rd of April, still on autopilot. And all the information that came was from everybody else, and was just sort of just going along with their suggestions, going along with what they, will say and what will happen next. And then we get onto the stage where there's the suggestion to go down to the scene. Isn't it funny how you get the feeling, or how a regular area, an area that you frequent, an area that you know very well, goes from being a freeway to a scene, and a scene that your son is part of and was involved in. And at this point is where we all had no idea what to picture, what to think, what to make of all of this. And I guess it was kind of like, well, this doesn't seem real. 5.5 years later, it still doesn't seem real. But I think the question was put, and it was that you don't have to if you don't want to. But I think what Dad said about it, rung pretty true to me, and I agree with. And he said, if we don't, then we're definitely going to regret it. And it was kind of like, we need to see this for ourselves. I need to see that this isn't some sort of joke. I need to see that this is real. And I think I said a couple of times, so when's the joke? When's the punchline coming? When's the joke? This is some sort of sick joke, isn't it? God, is he going to appear? Is this fake? Is this a setup? And is this a dream? And because it did not seem real. We just had the information of, that Josh had died. And it was just like, no, you're wrong. It's not true. In these circumstances, absolutely not. That doesn't happen. Not to Josh, not to 4 police members. And so we then make the decision that, okay, this is what we'll do. And we get driven down and, can't really say much or don't really know what to say. But what I do remember saying is that, getting closer to the freeway and seeing how busy it is on the other arterials like Kilby Road and Chandler Highway and things like that. And I remember commenting on the traffic build-up because the freeway was closed. And I said, oh, gee, I think I was saying, oh, wow, look at all this traffic. What's the situation here? And then I think someone replied and just said, that's because the freeway is closed. This is, and just sort of said simply, I guess, because it was to an answer that I, a question where I was like, what's going on here? And yeah, wow, okay, wow, it really is this, this really is happening, I guess. And then he said, yeah, well, it's closed in both directions. It's just this. And so time passes and we eventually get down there and it's so eerie. It was so eerie, can't even begin to describe it, where we get taken onto the freeway from Chandler Highway. So we come onto the freeway heading outbound Chandler Highway, and there's no one around. It's empty. It's a wasteland. It was. I can picture it now. Eerie, as I said, eerie doesn't even begin to describe it. Of nothing. Where normally there's just, at every second of the day, there's cars passing through it, trucks, motorbikes. It's just this super highway of information. And at this point, there is nothing. Not even a breath of wind. It is just empty, completely empty. And we're, approaching, and I'm sort of going, well, where is this? Where is it? What's going on? Where is this? And go under the Belford Road Bridge as we're heading towards it. And then comes into view emergency services vehicles, recovery vehicles, and just this scene. It looked like a movie scene. Still, didn't look real. It was like a movie scene. And we were sort of just looking at it going, right, this is where it took place. And we get out, and we just, I just looked around and just went, this is incredible. This is, and I say that in a way of just with pure shock. This is just absolutely out of this world of what we're looking at, of what I'm seeing right now. And looking at the scene, you sort of think, Jesus, that's pretty full on. I wonder how this all looked, when it all occurred. And I remember looking over and to obviously the spot that it happened, and I just stared at it, because in my mind it was me thinking to myself, that's where it happened. That's where my brother died, at that spot. There was nothing, glorious about it. It was the side of the road, and still coming to terms with it at that point, and then I guess me and Dad both just stood next to each other, and Mum as well. We stood next to each other and we just cried. And I just kept saying, I'm sorry. To Josh, I just kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I couldn't stop this and I couldn't protect you from this, because beforehand, when we worked together, and then when he sort of was following in my footsteps, I was able to help him along, and I was able to give him advice, and I was able to help him, with how things went and how to look after himself and how to, what best processes to take to make sure that the outcome was the best in terms of safety and just as a general outcome. But in this moment, I felt so helpless and hopeless because I couldn't protect him from this. And there were previous times where I could. But in this time, he was on his own. Well, I felt that he was on his own. And there was nothing he could do about this. He was completely vulnerable to the elements of other people's poor decisions and behaviours. And obviously as well to Kevin, Lynette and Glenn. It wasn't fair that they were subjected to this, because they were just doing their job. Why should you expect that this is going to happen? That was my thought process with going through it. Why should this be even a thought that you could be so unsafe in this position? And that's how I felt with Josh, that he didn't deserve to be, and same with Kevin, Lynette and Glenn. They didn't deserve to be in this position. And then afterwards, they're part of this horrendous image. And just looking at that and picturing that in my mind's eye of just this empty freeway where there's not a sound, there's not a breath of wind, it's just us there looking at this. And then after, it's kind of like seeing a monument. You kind of go, all right, there's nothing more to see. Nothing's changing about it now. So what do we do? And we left it at that, because obviously, things had to be rehabilitated, and obviously the things that weren't we didn't need to know or anything like that was just to happen. And then I guess there are so many pieces that sort of just, like core memories that just remain, like that day, the day after being what we just spoke about, and then the day of his funeral. And then the lead up to that, it wasn't that much later. So, that's the 22nd, that's the 23rd of April, and his funeral. I hate that word. Send off, I guess. Yeah. For me, it's easy to say the word, but when I say Josh's funeral, it sounds gross to hear. And same with, when you say, when Josh passed away and when Josh died, your mum would agree with this as well, is that you can't bring yourself to say it. It's hard it's so hard to say, even 5 years later. And so, I guess, we get to this next part. I honestly think as well that he would get a kick out of it being on the 4th of May, on Star Wars Day. But this is one thing that I can remember very vividly as well. Unfortunately, with the rules that we had of it having to be a 10-person funeral, again, we won't delve into that too much. Obviously, with a lot of people who also went through that, having to have a 10-person funeral, but we'll move on from that. Had it at Xavier College. Now, Xavier College is where me and Josh both went to school, and when it came to the location for it, this is where particularly Mum and Dad wanted it to be, because this is where, if I could think of the reason why, is because this was the place, this was the school where his and my lives were shaped into who we are. Xavier College had a mantra and values of being men for others. And every Xaverian and old Xaverian will tell you that that is one of the core values of that school and what you do for the rest of your life, hopefully. And that's what shaped us into wanting to be who we were. And so it felt fitting that the Xavier College Chapel, with past and present priests, members of the chapel and the school, were part of it too, because they were part of his and part of our lives. And so it felt fitting, but it also felt so horribly wrong that we look around that day, very gloomy, rainy day. We look around that day, and that is a place that he and I spent so much of our lives, whether it was crafting what we loved to do, whether it was sport, whether it was performing arts, music. Who the hell would have thought that one day you're going to have your funeral at this location and you're going to have to spend a day mourning the loss and farewelling your brother at this location that has been so instrumental in your lives? Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. The way that it started, anybody who knows this song, My Hero, that was the introduction to the ceremony. That was the introduction. The drum intro that just rang out, and unfortunately, and it was just so, for me, it was just like, oh, I can't believe that people who are watching this online can't hear this, because in a way it sounded, looking back, you go, that sounded pretty cool. To hear this as the opening to a send-off. And we hope we picked the right music. We hope we picked the right photos. We hope we picked the right ways of how this was to go. Maybe. The song Manny of Horror by Biffy Clyro. Interstate Love Song by Stone Temple Pilots. Coming Home by City and Colour. That were just things that were just like, I when it came to deciding these things, it was just like, yeah, this one, and that one. And it was like, wow. And then Always With Me, Always With You by Joe Satriani as well. That one, because that's what he loved to play. He just rang it so well on his own guitars, and then it was just so fitting that this song was the one for him to be, it for his send-off. God, I hate using that. I hate saying that. There was a time where, during it, where it felt so long. It felt so long. I remember afterwards talking to Dad, and we were saying, we both agreed. We said, at one point, I was like, can I go? Can I leave? Because this is I've had enough. It just felt like I just had enough of being here. I don't want to be here, and I just can't be here. And then following that, obviously when he's, leaving the chapel, and we have Pol Air flying over, rattling the windows, an address over a police radio, and his school friends lining the driveway of the college. All these things that are just coming back to mind. Just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. And media who are taking photos, and there's so many photos of us loading, him into the, and seeing those and things like that, and just going, yeah, wow. And obviously, when they they hit the papers and they hit media and things like that, and we just look at them and we're going, yeah, who the hell is that? What are you doing on TV? What are you? Why am I looking at myself here? And yeah, more phenomenal feelings. Just, this isn't us. This isn't happening to us, is it? Surely not. But it was. And then it was kind of like, I guess, to put these in the way of the least professional speak, a bit of a lap of honour of Q. An escort through the streets, and watching my surrounds was also just incredible. Absolutely incredible, because yeah, we come out onto Barker's Road and there's people again lined the streets. Traffic stopped. People in tears watching this procession take place and watching this unfold. And we're just following along this procession and I remember looking at people that stopped in their cars and in tears, and watching how this is going, and just this is where it got so surreal. That wherever he is as well, he's watching this and seeing how this is panning out, and then yeah. And so we go around Burke Hall, which is the junior campus of Xavier College, and there's people as well who are lined alongside and farewelling. And then at times, comes a time where this finishes, where the time comes. Yeah, there's got to be an end to all of this, doesn't there? So, and then that was obviously, and we kind of we think back and we go, do we wish that we had have continued? I don't know. Where we were, the hearse was kind of like that, and you liken it to Fast and the Furious, where they go their separate ways. It was like that. And I remember when we stopped following and watched it go out of sight. I remember Mum, we didn't say anything up until the point where Mum said, "Goodbye, my love." And then it was just silence for the rest until we eventually got back home. And yeah, don't even know how it all sort of went from there either. From then, you had the unfortunate feeling of everything's now going to stop. Not completely, but things are just going to be different now. You had so much build up. You had so much, I guess, the actual incident itself, the going down to the scene a few days later and things just happening, and then there's going to be the time where things aren't going to happen anymore. Things are kind of just going to, peter out. And then what? What now was the feeling? And from that day, I think there was a time where we had everyone over afterwards, refreshments and things like that. And then it got to a point where we're all just in our lounge room and watching the time go by, I guess. And I think my cousin had his arm around me and just given me a hug, and then I just went, I gotta go to bed. And I said, I had enough. I gotta go to sleep. Because I think it's the first, again, just a dump of exhaustion and adrenaline. And I said, I need to go to bed. And it was in the middle of the afternoon, and I just took myself up to bed and I just slept. And I think I got up later that night because, to watch, we're sort of going, oh yeah, don't. In a way, it's kind of strange where you go, yeah, well, don't forget to tune into the news because it'll be on. And then I remember having the conversation with Dad afterwards as well, or the times after where we pointed out just how strange it was, where you look at yourselves on TV and on the news and you go, who the hell is that? It looks like you. Wait a minute, he is you. What are you doing? What's going on? And there are so many times where that happened, and it was just like, in the end, you just couldn't help but laugh at it a little bit and go, oh, jeez. And it's not fair either on everybody else who's going through this or has gone through this in their lives. Just because of the magnitude that it was, doesn't make it any different. And you wish you could give everyone that airtime to be able to talk and be a part of it and share their grief this way. We were sort of thrown into it in a way. Over time, it became a good way of, I guess, for me, for remembering, for helping my healing and grief in it all, because that's what it was. It was grief. And when you're in grief, and there are so many who would know the feeling of it, is that you can't describe it and you just want to get out. Just want to get out from this tar, this glue of grief that sticks you where you stand. And I guess that's the best way that I can put this story. The story of that 10-day, 2-week time. Because then after, I can't remember. After is downs, many ups, maybe. But there comes a time where, I think I had a chaplain say this to all of us, and that was, there will be a time where you wonder where everyone's gone. Not in a way that it's like, oh, geez, everyone's abandoned me. It's like, well, geez, we were in the spotlight a little bit there, but okay, now it's stopped. That's really hard to navigate. I think everyone can agree with that. Where not that it doesn't seem important anymore, but it just seems that, all right, moving on. In a way, it's not right to think of it like that, but that's kind of, yeah. You don't move on from it, you just move forward from it. You let the days just roll, and that's what I did for many months after. You just let the day roll. You stay up until you fall asleep. You get up whenever you get up, whenever you want to get out of bed, whenever you want to roll out of bed. That's what the grief feels like. But for the time of when you lose someone, and when that happens, I guess that's mine, from just what I've spoken about. The day itself, the day after, and a farewell. So, yeah. I'd say there's not really much else to talk about from here. That's my version, in the best way that I can put it, without starting, trying to think of the right thing to say. That is, I guess, the go to woe version, unabridged, unedited, unscripted version of that day for me. And I wanted to put it out there, but I've sat on it for so long. I wanted to put it out there because what stopped me is obviously the confidence to put it out there. This is just me talking about it, and I don't want it to feel like I'm talking about myself. This is just the story that I've thought to myself. There've been times where I've spoken about it before, but I want to talk about it from me, without having to be asked any questions. Just literally go and roll with it. Just talk about the day. Talk about the day after. Talk about the farewell. And I guess there it is. And there are so many. The reason why is because there are so many, and we want everyone to be confident in telling their story about how they came to and experienced their world crashing down. And this is the ripple. This is what it feels like to be in the ripple effect, the ripple of road trauma. And everybody deserves that platform to be able to speak about it, because it's not just because of the magnitude that ours was. Everyone's is just as important as the last. So, thank you if you've gotten this far. we're a bit into it. I hope I haven't missed anything. I hope I haven't, I hope it's been okay for people listening. That's, obviously difficult. Not an easy thing to talk about, but this is what I want to do. This is me. This is what I want to do for those affected by road trauma, and this is hopefully something that can be helpful for those who have gone through the same thing. And I encourage them as well to share their stories, share their loved ones, because no one deserves this. Absolutely no one. So thanks again for listening. We'll hopefully have more episodes of a bit brighter subjects. But thanks again for listening into episode 3 of the Road Best Travel podcast of the 22nd of April, 2020.